Tuesday night on NXT, Walter had a match against Roderick Strong, and it was a battle. It was the best thing on the show from the two veterans. I would expect nothing less. Walter recently moved to the US and wrestled his final match for the NXT UK brand, which I talked about last week. I thought it was the match of the week. They called it Walter's Last Stand, and it was a great match. So this was his official arrival on NXT 2.0. After the match, he hijacked the microphone and he declared the winner of the match as Gunther, or Gunther, as he pronounced it. Before the other members of Imperium ganged up on Roddy, that brought out the rest of Diamond Mine, and all hell broke loose. Although not quite as much as it did on social media when this show went off the air. It was 3 years ago this month that Walter made his NXT UK debut at the end of TakeOver Blackpool. He got in the ring to confront the then NXT UK champion, I guess they were the WWE UK champion, Pete Dunne. And people were very excited. I had only been marginally familiar with the man's work. People who were really into the European wrestling scene would write into the show and tell me about this guy, Walter. You know, he's a beast, you gotta see him. And he would chop the shit out of people. And I just remember thinking, the first time that I heard his name, could there be a less intimidating name for a pro wrestler than Walter? And as I started to watch more of his work, I quickly realized why people were raving about the guy. And suddenly the name Walter didn't seem to matter much to me. I quickly became a fan of his work. He had given an interview to The Mirror a few months before that, before he debuted, and he was very clear at the time. He had no interest in going to Raw or SmackDown if WWE came calling. He said he did not want to live in the United States. New Japan had made him an offer around that time. He turned them down because he didn't want to move to Japan. He didn't want to go on any extended tours. But he did sign with WWE. And within months, they made him their United Kingdom champion. For 870 days, Walter held that UK title until he dropped it to Ilya Dragunov at TakeOver 36, the last takeover ever, a very appropriate place for his run to come to an end. And that's when the rumors started that Walter may have had a change of heart. Walter might be more open to going to Raw or SmackDown. Walter supposedly split with his wife. He has started dating Ginny from the NXT UK women's division. They started posting pictures with each other all over social media. And now he is suddenly open to moving to the US. His brief flirtation with the main roster a few years ago did not exactly inspire a lot of confidence about what a future for him on Raw or SmackDown would look like. Had he stuck around, it would not have taken very long for him to be dancing on TV. Walter has been under contract to this company for 3 years as Walter, which is his birth name. That is his real name. And as we know, WWE likes to own you. They like to own you. They want to own your name. They want to own your likeness. They want to own your soul. And they want to make as much money off of you as possible and stop you from then taking that name somewhere else if you ever leave. And it's very likely that you will leave at some point. We are seeing in increasing numbers people who will leave. WWE ends up not being the end-all be-all for them. They either choose to leave or they get cut. But it seems to be happening at a higher rate now than at any other point that I can remember. So I wouldn't sit here and say Walter is going to be a lifer in this company. It's very likely at some point that he will leave. And we'll end up back on the independent scene, or we'll end up, working for another company. So I get, if you put yourself in WWE's mind and the way they operate, I understand why they do these things. But it doesn't make it any less upsetting when they take somebody's name that they have developed in wrestling for over, a period of years, and they take it away from them and they start calling them something else. It is stupid. It is very, very stupid. But stupid does not begin to describe this company filing to trademark the name of an old German U-boat commander from World War II, which they plan to use for Walter. They filed the application 1 week earlier. I had only read about it earlier that day, that he wrestled Roddy on TV. It was Louis Dangor who first reported on Twitter that a simple Google search turned up that Gunther Stark, which was the name they trademarked or filed to trademark, was in fact not the name of Iron Man's German half-brother. Gunther Stark was the name of a Nazi naval commander whose boat was sunk in the English Channel in 1944. And this was the name that they were going to give to Walter. And when people started talking about the connection on social media, it blew up in the company's face. There were mainstream articles online about this. And by the time Walter rebranded himself on TV at the end of the show on Tuesday, he was only Gunther and not Gunther Stark. But the company got a lot of negative publicity for it, and rightfully so. It is embarrassing that nobody there can be bothered to do a simple Google search to make sure that this sort of thing does not happen. That, or they just figured that nobody would care. But when you have wrestling websites like PW Insider, they've been doing this now for years, reporting on every little trademark filing that WWE does, every little trademark filing that AEW does to, give us a sense of what characters might be coming in or what the new name of an upcoming show or an upcoming pay-per-view might be. These trademark filings sometimes make headlines on the wrestling news websites because they can give us a sense of what's coming. You didn't have this issue 20 years ago. We didn't hear about these sorts of things, even though it was, publicly accessible. But we didn't read about the trademark filings 15, 20, 25 years ago because we didn't have the websites to just pop onto and read about these sorts of things before. They weren't reported on the way that they are today. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I saw a lot of people this week, if this was, 25 years ago during the Attitude Era, nobody would have known. Well, it was a different time. Of course nobody would have known because it wasn't being reported on. But now it is. And the companies have to be cognizant of this. That when they go and they do stuff like this, people are going to find out about it. They're going to report on it. It's going to become public knowledge. It's a different world now. Otherwise, I never would have known who Gunther Stark even was. It's not as if he was goose-stepping next to Hitler and was a household name. But the reality is people do look these things up, and when it comes out, it is very embarrassing. If you don't do your due diligence, it can be very embarrassing. I would be upset to jump on Twitter and find out that WWE had just unknowingly named me after a Nazi lieutenant. And now, when people look me up, they might also find information out about this other person. Remember when Triple H was on with Steve Austin and he was asked about China and the Hall of Fame and he gave this cockamamie excuse about, we don't want children Googling her for fear of what people might find, all the porn. Well, I wouldn't want people jumping on Google either or social media and finding out that I was given the name and likeness of someone like this. That would be upsetting to me if I were in that person's shoes. But that's the issue I had with them doing what they did. Contrary to all the e-drones online who thought I was referring only to the name Gunther, when I initially tweeted about this, I was referring to the trademark filing for the full name. Yes, I have heard the name Gunther before. It is not a Nazi name. I understand that. You should have seen the messages that I got showing me pictures of the barista from Friends, who I couldn't identify this guy in a lineup if I tried. I could not possibly care any less because I have never watched a full episode of Friends in my entire life. I've seen bits and pieces. I'm aware of who the main characters are on the show. I'm sorry I couldn't identify who the barista from Friends was. I was more of a Seinfeld guy myself. We learned a few days later, in fact, actually, I think it was the very next day, that WWE abandoned the trademark for the name Gunther Stark after getting egg all over their face. He's still Gunther, but they wisely decided against moving forward with the Stark part of his name. And it's funny, I tweeted that follow-up once that information came out that they had dropped the application. They had dropped the trademark filing, and so I put another tweet up. And I got a message from someone calling me a moron for carrying water for WWE rather than taking them to task. I swear, it's getting harder and harder to keep track of which company I'm biased for. I mean, one day I'm carrying water for WWE, the next day I'm kissing AEW's ass. I mean, the direct deposits from Vince McMahon and Tony Khan, they must be going to the same place, but nobody bothered to give me the account number. I can't seem to gain access to the funds that they are funneling to me. It's comments like that that give me all the validation I need to know that I am doing things the right way. These people are truly dumber than dirt. As I said the other night, I offer my apologies to Dirt for even making that comparison. It was wrong of me. It was wrong of me to compare these deranged children to something that has been around for millions of years. I mean, Dirt predates all of us. It just sits there and it minds its own business. It didn't do anything wrong. It did not deserve that comparison. So to wrap this up, Walter is now Gunther. I think it is beyond idiotic to let him keep his name for 3 years while under contract to your company and then change it. And I'm sure he's under a different contract now. It was a different type of contract maybe when he was within it. I don't give a shit. He was working for WWE. He was working for this company for 3 years. And then they change his name. It's not like he's a nobody. People know who he is. He's built up a name over all these years. And then they take it away from him. Now, maybe he didn't want to sign the rights over to them. And you know what? I wouldn't blame him at all if that was the case. But I think back to how I felt about the name Walter when I first heard about him. I got used to it. We will get used to Gunther too. Because at the end of the day, it's still the same guy, and so long as he's on my TV chopping the shit out of people, that's what matters the most. But the minute they have him fucking dancing in the ring, I'm going off. I am going off.